All right, folks, I'm gonna give you my close to final before everything goes together. So I ended up cutting a lot of stuff back and dead ending it. A lot of the wires that we said we weren't gonna use, and they're just here. And I've just blocked them all off with heat shrink and pinching it. This here is where the cruise control goes on the Ranger, typically. And this here is the bundle of wires out of the cruise control on the TDI. This is a bundle of wires that come out of the cab, so I was thinking I could use them for switches and like clutch switches and stuff if I need it to. However, I'm not gonna hook this setup right now because the truck is not currently running and drive. Well, it's running, but it's not currently driving, so it's kind of hard for me to set up cruise control and all that, and I'm not really worried about it anyways. But I want it to be right here, so I'm gonna end up having this sticking out here, ready to do something with it if need be. I have additional relays over here now, 2 of them. I could have done it on one, because the draw on it is about 2 amps total for both, like, combined. So I added 2 relays though. I actually reutilized them. One was like a fuel pump and one was something else. So as you can see, this is not finalized, but everything, all the connections are made to where they're gonna have to be. I also added a few more relays, but these were for lights, because I'm putting rack lights on this truck, and I'm also putting reverse lights on an LED, I think, or something. I don't know, we'll see. So I got that hooked up. So basically, I use this here power distribution block for fusing some things. This here is a constant that went down to the fuel pump engine harness there. That needed to be a constant, so I got that ran. Then I have 2 more wires that I ran over for my lights, but that's unrelevant to the TDI swap. The 12-volt constant, that's going to the computer over there, and then the other one is going to the glow plugs. So those are 2 constants that go onto here. So those are the 2 big ones. One's the computer, one's the glow plugs. Then this one here, like I say, was the constant for the pump. So that was all the constants. Then there was the switched wires, which are down in this jumble up mess of wires here. And there's the yellow. What I did is I put the yellow and the blue and yellow. I put those together in a splice, and then I ran the purple wires, which are the wake wires. Those ones drawed virtually nothing. So there was a relay over here that had way smaller gauge wire going to it. So I ran that, and it's got a 5 amp fuse on it. But anyway, that runs the wake up signal for whatever, for the computer, I guess it is. So that's basically all you need to power it up. And if you do the harness up like we discussed in the beginning of the video, you shouldn't have any problems. I basically bled the fuel system, and I just thought, well, here we go. We're going to see if she goes. I jumped in there, touched the key, and like the second crank, it just fired right up. So I was quite impressed. Everything on the dash works in this truck now. To make all the gauges work on the Ranger here, I used this one here. This is a coolant sensor out of the Ranger itself. I don't know how well that's going to end up holding up, but what I did is I drilled this. This was the original 45, and it had a pipe that went out there, and I just drilled it out bigger to put this in, and then that hose there clamps it in there so it can't slide out. But this is a pressurized system, so I don't know if that's going to end up leaking or causing me problems. But if it does, I'm going to end up getting a threaded sensor and a straight through there with a tapped hole in it and putting it in that. Either way, doesn't really matter. That should actually be closer to the engine anyway, so if I end up doing that, I will probably put a pass-through there, and then closer in there, I will relocate that. For now, that's where it's going to be. We'll see how it goes. The speed sensor on this truck works because it's ran off the transmission. The oil pressure sensor was very easy to do. I had another motor like this, so I took the oil pressure sensor out of it, and then if you go down inside there to your oil where's it at there? To your oil filter housing. There's an extra plug in there, and you can unscrew it, take it out, and you can actually screw in another oil pressure sensor in there. So I did that, and then I ran the wires out of it to the Ranger signal in that went to the computer that goes to the dash. The fuel gauge is ran off the computer already. Don't have to do anything with that. So there's that and that and that, and then the battery monitor is done, and it's working. And the way I did that was for the alternator, it needs a switched wire. I believe it's a switched wire anyway. So the factory Ranger harness actually had the wire I needed, which was a switched wire. So I spliced that into the Volkswagen alternator. And then I ran the other wire, which there's this like a signal wire on it or something. I didn't use it for anything at this point, but I ran it over to this side here by the computer. It's actually in that bundle there. So that's there. Don't need it that I know of, but it's ran anyway. So that's that. Then what else did I do? For the tachometer. And I have an awful time to find out information online on how all this stuff works. Some of it's in like an AC sine wave, some of it's in square waves and rectified or whatever. I don't know. It's all confusing. So what I ended up doing was actually quite simple, and it should have been stated that it was that simple, I believe. I have some information for this truck and for TDI swaps in general, and I'll give you that information in the description, or I'll flash it on the screen, whatever. It had a green wire. I ran directly up to here, which spliced, actually that's it right there. It's like a green and brown. It spliced right in there into this is the wire that sends signal to the tach on the dash. So it ran straight from the ECU to the dash. Then there's a wire you have to cut on the dash, which will allow you to have an accurate reading on the Ranger tach. It reduces it down to think it's a 4-cylinder, because some of these Rangers did have 4 cylinders, so it worked out fine. So that's awesome and pretty neat. So I will show you the diagram, and hopefully you guys can figure it out from there. And so that's about all the sensors, but then I did run for a light on the dash there for the glow plugs. There's a wire in this bundle here somewheres. I think it was green and red or something. Anyway, I ran that to the dash and spliced it into one of the lights, indicator lights that's on the dash. So it's actually the fuel cap, something about fuel cap or fuel valve or something. Anyway, I tied it into that so that light comes on and goes out. So I know that the glow plugs are cycling. And I know I'm going to have to, because there's one of them there that it'll like stutter the engine unless you tie it into your clutch. Like the first acceleration, it'll stutter it, which is going to be kind of annoying. So that wire, I'm going to have to do something with. I don't know what yet. I haven't really figured it out, and it's going to be one of those experimental things. So for now, it's ran into the truck, and it's there so I can play with it when the time comes when I'm driving it. I want this fan here to kick on and cool the engine. So a lot of different ways to do this, and in the end, I decided to make up my own setup here, which is a relay that has constant power on one side. The other side goes down to a plug here, which is the one that goes onto the radiator fan. And very simple. The red and black wire is power. The brown and black wire is ground. So this wire here, I'm going to ground. This wire here grounds the relay. And then to allow it to come on and off, it's going through this here, which is the temperature sensor on the radiator. And it's getting a switched wire right there from the ignition, so it'll turn that on, and then it'll go to here, and then once this switch decides to close, then it will send power through to the relay, and the relay will kick the fan on. Pretty basic. Okay, so now that the truck's all together, that fuel system that I ran did function properly. I hesitate to upload videos of stuff like that until I know for sure that it's going to work. So anyway, the fuel lines come up here. Nothing's neatened, and like this truck still just tore apart, but nowhere's near done. But it's running and it is functioning properly. So I figure now is the time to say it worked, and this is a legitimate way to run it. So I got the lines ran up to here, and they run to the stock fuel filter right there. The feed line is on this side, and it is the clear line here, and it goes down to that spot in the injection pump. This is the return line. It goes up to here into this check valve and back down. Now, I've had no problems with it pulling fuel. I haven't drove the thing any amount, but it does run fine. So this setup seems totally legitimate. The only thing you're gonna have to do to get your truck to run is once you get that all hooked up, then you're gonna have to pull this line off and get some sort of mighty vac, or I use one of them little suction for testing vacuum lines and stuff. Got one of them on there, and it took a lot of time and a lot of squeezing, and it took a while, but it did work. And I just basically did it until the filter was full and until everything was coming out through here. Now this motor sat for years with no fuel in the injection pump, so I don't know how the stupid thing ran, because I heard horror stories about it online, but somehow it did. At first it wouldn't hold it. You could just see everything going back down the inlet, and I was like, uh-oh, but it actually ended up seating up. So once I got fuel coming out of here solid, I put the line back on, then I cracked the injectors and I started cranking it over, and I let it go and go until some was squirting out or whatever. And then I went and checked this again and pulled a little bit more vacuum out of it, because I wasn't getting enough shooting out, I didn't think. But anyway, I must have, because once I did all that, put these all back on, put the line back on, the pump decided it was going to hold pressure here. So as you can see, there's one little bubble, which is pretty well normal. And so it seems to be holding pressure right into the pump there. So anyway, that's the fuel system on it, and it's quite basic, so quite easy from there. But the serpentine belt is a 55.5-inch long belt that I bought at Napa. And the way it's mounted is, as you can see, I'm just running the alternator and the power steering pump, and I have an idler there, which is adjustable. So how I did it is I made a plate that goes through one bolt of the alternator to the other bolt of the alternator, put a groove in it so you can slide it up and down for tension. Found the most tight spot I could, drilled a hole, put the tensioner on there, cranked it down, then adjusted that to the tightest possible place, cranked it down, and I'm sure it may need to be cranked down more as the belt sort of wears in. I would have much rather a spring retention system on it, but I wasn't really interested in getting that into it. I thought this should be fine, so we'll see. Anyway, that's all there is to that. The power steering pump here, I hooked up, and I basically used the stock reservoir there down to the rack, and then for the pressure side, I actually used a Ford Ranger power steering line, and I bolted it right into the pump. And so far, I've started it, and I don't see that it's leaked any, but for the radiator, I used the stock Volkswagen radiator. I used the stock Ranger mounts on the bottom, and then I made up some mounts on the top here, kind of angle around there, and then that side goes straight down. That was quite simple. The airbox, stock Ranger airbox, I used the Volkswagen mass airflow sensor, actually the whole piece there that bolts onto the Volkswagen airbox. 3-liter Ranger intake pipe here, ran down and onto a plumbing adapter, which is then bolted onto the turbo. And this is the PCV valve, which runs up and into the PCV breather thing there. And this is for the boost gauge on the dash. There's for the intercooler lines. I'm not really happy with the shape of this. It should be straight and then down. So I think in the future, a lot of this stuff will get improved, but for now, it's ABS pipe, and it doesn't look that bad because it's black, so it just kind of blends in. You don't really say, oh, look, it's a piece of PVC or something. So I ran that, and I'm thinking it's probably going to need some mounting support, and as well as a lot of stuff in here needs supported yet, but I have some funky little bends and stuff to get onto the turbo there to avoid hitting anything on the truck itself. But that's the outlet side there and the intake side here. Mount it down here on a very crooked intercooler, but I used the stock Ranger mounting bracket there for the AC rad, and I use that in combination with another little piece I modified on there to go and put that as I wanted it as high as possible, because I don't want you to see this line going. And the stock bumper, well, it'll come down to there anyway, so I don't think you'll see it, or if you do, it'll be very little, and that's kind of what I was going for. Use the stock Volkswagen. You got to use this Volkswagen reservoir in combination with the Rad. If you're going to leave the Ranger radiator, you could go that route and do things quite a little bit differently. But I just chose to stick with everything that came off the car because it's a lot less headache and a lot more reusability to everything. So I really didn't have to go out and source radiator fans and all this kind of stuff, and it was all right there. I just had to put it on and figure out how I was going to make it work.